the apogee of her body of work. It is symphonic, it is masterly. On the 16th of December, 1775, Jane Austen was born. So that means that this year is the 250th anniversary of her birth, and I thought that I would like to do some more Jane Austen content this year in the build-up to that momentous day. But I thought that today I would just do like a quick, rapid-fire look through her body of work. Go through these novels and other earlier texts, ranking them from least valuable and important to most. I would love to hear from you guys. What is the ordering of Austen's works in your mind? What is your least to most favorite Austen books? I would love to hear your own rankings. Have you read the minor stuff? Have you read the letters? So I'm going to group these ones together at the bottom. These are her sort of Juvenilia, her early works. I've discussed Lady Susan on the channel before, so I won't really mention this now. I will leave the link to a video in which I talked about that one. But then we've also got some other early works. Note the wayward spelling, Beautiful Cassandra, and Love and Friendship. This is classic young Austen, self-educated and doing her thing from an early age. And why are these? And there's also the History of England, which is also this kind of parodic short entries on royal personages. So what is the value in reading these early works? Well, to put it as succinctly as possible, they offer us a glimpse into her mature body of work. So we can see in these understandably rough-hewn, frivolous and playful early texts key aspects of her later work, and for that reason it's really worthwhile to delve into them. Sometimes it can be a little frustrating. I think of these, the most fun is Love and Friendship, because it's very ironic and lampoonish and it's a riot, really. What are the key things that we can take from these 4 volumes about her later work? Well, letter writing. Many of these take the epistolary form. They are fictional letters between characters. But also her sense of being an entertainer, of wanting, she wrote these stories for her family members as entertainment, and she always wanted to, I think that was her ambition even from a young age, to meld high literary finesse with fun and rambunctious, rollicking entertainment, social critique, zesty and zany and playful and ironizing, but at the same time delivering masterful prose. And of course she didn't deliver on all those fronts early on, but it's certainly a fascinating glimpse into her developmental stages as a writer. Next is another little trilogy, a little collection of sort of early and unfinished works. This is a very cheesy movie adaptation book cover, which I can't stand really, but it's surprisingly fun. Sanditon, of these 3, one of them is Lady Susan again. Now normally when I have multiple versions of a particular text in my collection, I use that as an impetus to reread that text. But I just can't bring myself to reread Lady Susan, which says enough about it, I think. The Watsons is another early one, although around 1804, and she had already completed early drafts of some of her major works. So you see her coming into her own voice more substantially. But what makes this volume worthwhile is Sanditon. Sanditon was her final work. It's incomplete at the time of her death, and there's a poignancy blended with irony really in this work, because she really parodies herself, her sister, her aunt, the people, the woman that she was closest to, because they were quite neurotic, and the comedy of Sanditon is about these women who are continually fretting about their ailments and illnesses, and it's really funny to see this kind of self-satirizing impulse, but of course knowing that she did die of illness only at the age of 42, there is a real sadness and a longing at the end of Sanditon to for the incomplete and for the unknowable that we will never see. So that's a real pity. But yeah, if you're serious about Jane Austen, then it's you should definitely read Sanditon. I've got her selected letters. Now, she wrote thousands. Jane Austen wrote thousands and thousands of letters, but only 161 letters survive. Most of them are to her sister Cassandra and are contained within this volume from the Oxford University Press and edited by Vivian Jones, eminent scholar Vivian Jones. But most of her letters were destroyed by her siblings, and it's perhaps understandable for the family secrets that they would have betrayed, or the revealment of Austen's personal sufferings, or her ego perhaps, or literary ambitions. All of the really juicy salt and vinegar of a kind of raw and riotous, personal correspondence or diaries. That I love that genre, especially with writers that have impacted me. But unfortunately, all of the really, really gory and insinuating material has been destroyed. So, but it's still interesting to see again this impulse to entertain. Letters were. It was not cheap even for a reasonably well-to-do family like the Austens. The cost of paper, the cost of ink, the cost of postage, it was dear. So she, really didn't want to waste time and be a bore. But at the same time, that gossipy, racy, sardonic tone and attitude, she really imbues her letters with that smirking side of herself, because she didn't want to be dull. She wanted to entertain those loved ones. So again, that impulse comes through, and of course she used fictional letters to great effect in almost all of her major works. So this is her kind of, being a good family member, being a good sister and cousin and aunt and whatever, but at the same time also practicing that kind of suppleness and feeling of the extemporaneous through letter writing. And then we do get into her major novels. So Northanger Abbey, for me, ranks at the bottom, although I do really enjoy this novel, for the reason that it's kind of bifurcated into two parts, the first of which takes place at Bath, and it's this kind of rambling exploration of the social codes and the sort of mating habits of the upper classes at Bath, and going to balls. And I think what is frustrating about the first part of the novel is that Catherine Morland, the heroine, is so pliable and naive that, it's just she's a frustrating figure. But she comes into her own in the second half of this book, and that is where the title of Northanger Abbey comes into play, because all of her notions of the world have been garnered through reading sort of pulpy genre fiction, romance and Gothic novels. And there's an interesting blend of satire, but also of defense of the novel as a serious literary form. Of course, Austen had a horse in the race, so to speak. She was defending the novel because she was a novelist, but also a lot of the male critics of the time were very dismissive and patronizing towards the novel as this inferior literary form. Of course, now it is the major literary form commercially, and in the popular imagination, the novel is the dominant, ubiquitous form. But back then it was, poetry and drama were seen as these kind of much more high and intellectual and cerebral forms, and very masculine, whereas the novel was seen as inferior and feminine and domestic and so forth. So Austen is defending the novel and the Gothic and all of that, but also, it is a parody. It is funny. The comedy really comes from this gap in Catherine Morland's imagination of what this Northanger, what this abbey will be. She expects these craggy, shadowy, vampiric nooks and crannies and hauntings and the spectral and all of these spookinesses and sort of romantic images, but the gap between her expectations and the kind of mundane reality of this abbey is very comedic. So the second half is really great fun and also has that typical tumult of emotions and hopes of the characters, which you get caught up in. So, I mean, it's a great book. It's just that Austen set the bar very high in other works, of which the next, in my estimation, would be Sense and Sensibility. This is a great book because of the kind of poising and counterpoising of the two heroines. We've got Eleanor and her sister Marianne, and Eleanor is staid and stolid and faithful and conservative, conventional even. She's a warm-hearted, character, but she's very meek and mild and timid even. But Marianne is just so dynamic, and I think is second to only one other character who we're going to look at soon. Marianne is this dynamite. She is stormy and tumultuous and vivid and romantic and sparkling with vivacity, and she's a sort of iconoclast. She's just a really, really fantastic, hilarious, lovable character, and that's what makes Sense and Sensibility so worthwhile for me, and I really do love this novel for the figure of Marianne and how, of course, she is so superbly counterpoised by Eleanor, right? It's that juxtaposition of the two sisters, one with sense and the other one all sensibility, right, from the title, that balances the novel and is this undulation of these two sort of perspectives, and how the way that you portray yourself to the world and the way that you interact with the world is reciprocated back to you. So there's an interesting life lesson there about, how the way that we are also shapes what we are and what we become, and the opportunities and pitfalls that await us. So fantastic stuff. I'm going to say Persuasion, but it's a toss-up. This is Austen's slimmest novel, but her most gripping, her most white-knuckling, exciting, gorgeous. And I'm going to leave a link in which I talk more about Persuasion. But I normally recommend Persuasion as a text for people that haven't read Austen and are like asking me where to begin, because it's something you can read in a day or in a weekend, and because it is so riveting, so enthralling. Right, then we're down to the top three, or up to the top three. And I think this is, again, it's hard to choose between I think my number one is quite secure, but second and third are a toss-up. So, but we'll go for Emma. So Marianne is only second to Emma in terms of dynamic heroine. She is, I think, more than any other Austen character, a kind of surrogate for the author herself in her deep curiosity with human interaction with other people, and the way that her imagination runs away with her to such disastrous and hilarious effects. And I think that, as is so articulately argued by John Mullen in the introduction, this text is actually a sort of underrated example of an early attempt at stream of consciousness, at the free and direct style, because Austen patterns the sort of delays of readerly understanding onto the consciousness of the characters' minds. So we see events unfolding, but instead of having this kind of bird's eye or God's eye view of omniscience, we have partial, opaque, vague, incomplete perspectives, and that leads to an interesting delay in the satisfaction of understanding, and that I think mirrors also the characters and the eponymous heroine Emma. She's fully deserving of having the title of a novel for herself, because she is so vivacious and sprightly and sparkling. She's extremely intelligent, she's independent, she's not out to get a husband, and she is also proud and haughty at times and manipulative. And like I said, a surrogate for Austen in the way that she wants to contrive other people's life events. She wants to massage other events and other relationships into place, and she takes a deep pleasure and excitement in orchestrating other people's lives, and that is all driven by her fruitful imagination, but it also has disastrous consequences. Just phenomenal. And then the last two are Mansfield Park in second place, and then my number one, Pride and Prejudice. Mansfield Park, I do really love this novel, and it's a little out of fashion because the heroine, Fanny Price, is often seen as this kind of timid, retiring, meek, feminine, domestic character. But I think that also misses the point a little bit of that perspective of deriding this novel for being like anti-feminist or something. I think that's not a generous enough reading of this text, because there are, and there's also been very famous post-colonial critiques of Mansfield Park about like where does this, this sort of surreptitious source of this wealth, the effacement of the suffering that has enabled all of these, upper class characters to live in these giant mansions and have servants waiting on them hand and foot, and living in the lap of luxury. But I think that Fanny Price herself is an oppressed character, basically an orphan, and so there are layers of oppression, of denial, of hidden suffering that compile the DNA of this novel. And Austen is not a propagandist. She's not preaching for one thing or another. She's an artist bringing into being this lucent, glowing gossamer of interpersonal connections and affects, and it's so powerfully done, and it raises questions. Of course, it's not about giving you ready-made, potted answers. It's really about interrogating and the complicities that we are all a part of, systems in which there are people with more material wealth than us and people with less, and how implicated are we in the way that we move through the world, how much power, how much agency do we actually have to change these systems? These are all questions, I think, that are either tacit or explicitly raised in this novel, and most especially the female perspective, right? Another thing about this is I think it's so humbling. It's such a important reminder that to be generous, to be kind, to be empathetic to other people is something that you must do on other people's terms. To move through the world saying that I want to be a nice person. Everyone wants to be a nice person, right? I want to be nice, I want to be kind, but only on my terms. And if you're different, or if you don't accept the things that I value, then, I'm going to trample over you. Most people don't do that consciously, but this novel explicates in such lucid detail the suffering that is wrought on the people that have a less of a voice, the people that are less, commanding in the way that they move through the world. Fanny Price is quiet. She's retiring. She's, she's not somebody that holds forth or pontificates about the way the world is or should be, and therefore people act on her behalf in ways that they, unconsciously believe will benefit her, but actually cause immense suffering and injustice. And this novel, I think, really reveals that in a way that is unforgettable and makes you always think twice when encountering other people, whether it's a waiter at a restaurant or someone, in a call center that you're talking to, what the poet Tony Hoagland would call, the punching bag at the front of a company, that these people that just deal with customer service or whatever, these different, people that clean bathrooms, whatever it is. It's so easy to be dismissive and flippant and impatient, but everyone has a story, everyone has suffered, and everyone has had a hand of cards dealt to them. And I think this book reminds you to not be so proud of your achievements and to remember how lucky you are if you have escaped destitution, that you should think twice before judging and boxing people off according to your own perspective. That turned into quite a sort of rant, but that's what Jane Austen engenders within me. Then number one, I'm going to be really quick about this because pretty much all of you have read this. Pride and Prejudice is her masterpiece. It covers the same ground, you know, a small group of people of the English upper classes, but it's not about the content. It's not about the material itself. And this is the lesson that I think I take from Pride and Prejudice, is that I want to read great writing. And in whatever form, whatever genre, it's about doing what you do well. Austen had a very narrow range of material, but she illuminated, you know, some of the deepest human aspects through this narrow range of material. And Pride and Prejudice is her, you know, her shining achievement, is the apogee of her body of work. It is symphonic. It is masterly. Every sentence, every line, every utterance is so superbly wrought. You can't really fault it in terms of aesthetics or in terms of like literary craft and delivery. It is absolutely sublime and repays rereading. And this great Norton critical edition has like a bunch of the most famous commentaries and critical essays on Austen and on Pride and Prejudice. Then I can't make one of these Austen videos without showing my old faithful, it's like a telephone directory, this thing, my old faithful Wordsworth complete novels of Jane Austen. I've waved this thing around, you know, many times on my channel, but I made a video about Jane Austen, then I had to include this big old beast with all of her major works. I love it. Anyway, look, we're going to leave it there. Like I said, 16th of December is the 250th anniversary of her birth. So yeah, let's do some more Austen content in the build up to that. And I would love to hear from you guys. What is the ordering of Austen's works in your mind? What is your least to most favorite Austen books? I would love to hear your own rankings. Have you read the minor stuff? Have you read the letters? I haven't touched on any biographies here, like, for example, Claire Tomalin's, and there are many other Austen biographies. So which of those would you recommend? And yeah, gonna leave it there. Thank you for watching and speak to you all soon.